Well, I'll bet you I'm gonna be a big star. Might win an Oscar, you can't never tell. And who's gonna make me a big star?
You're watching the C-Spine Show. I'm Dr. Craig Callewart. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Thank you for joining today. I hope you will like, share, and subscribe to the C-Spine Show. One of the topics that comes up this time of year as teenagers are going back to high school or starting college is what to do with the student athlete who has back pain. Because it's a real problem, and many times it's muscular, but sometimes it's down below the muscles, down into the skeleton, and then we would call that a structural problem. So one hand, it could be a soft tissue injury from improper training, from improper stretching, from improper buildup. On the other hand, it could be, again, a problem with the bone, nerves, and discs. And that can be really hard to figure out. So one of the things I do when I see the 16, 17, 18, 20-year-old individual is ask them, what did they do before the season? How did they start training? And for whatever reason, most of what I'm seeing is cheerleading and football. And with football, it's particularly kids who are on the line because the ball is snapped and they come and they lift up and then boom, they have contact. They're having contact when their spine is fully extended. And that puts the spine in a certain position that can cause injury. Cheerleading has its own set of injuries because women are more flexible, young ladies are more flexible than young men, and they're often hyperextending. So those two things are hyperextension injuries, one in females, one in males. But again, I start the conversation with what did you do in the summer? And for many people, it's working or going to school or just not much anything. So it's hard on the body to go from couch potato to high performance athlete. There's got to be a ramp up period of time, and the amount of time that needs to be is hotly debated, and it depends on the person and muscle memory and variety of things, but somewhere around 2 to 4 weeks to ramp yourself up. And then the issue becomes what kind of training do they do to build themselves up, and that's where being with a professional trainer can be very, very helpful. But at the end of the day, people do need to train. If the pain is persisting despite the right training, then I start to look for structural problems, and that's where an x-ray can be very helpful. One of the problems student athletes have is that, particularly in men, their bones aren't fully developed until late teens, early 20s. The bones stop growing a couple years after puberty, but the bone doesn't harden, much in the way concrete can be laid but not fully cured for a period of time. And there is a degree of variability as to when young men's bones fully harden. And sometimes kids are born or grow with a defect in the back arch of their last vertebra, and with extended time that can go ahead and heal, or sometimes it isn't going to heal. So one of the first things I've got to figure out is with young ladies and young men, is their back arch fully developed? And if it is developed, is it fully hardened? And a good chunk of time, the kids who are really struggling with pain have a defective back arch. And then the question becomes, well, what do we do about it? Ideally, we would just take a couple years off sports and see if it's going to develop, but that usually becomes career-ending for somebody. And for those young people who want to go down the pathway of professional sports or college sports, taking a couple years off just isn't going to happen. So we then discuss, well, how do you play with injury and what are the long-term risks? And those risks are significant and they're real, but it's hard to give a percentage or an exact amount of risk that would be present. So that's where seeing a experienced professional and having x-rays and a proper physical exam where you're testing the function of the low back and the hips are quite important. MRIs are not all that useful because they show nerves more so than the actual structure. And many times I see the athletes coming in the office with an MRI, but what really is more useful, again, is a standard X-ray or even a CAT scan, because we're looking at bone development and bone maturity. And again, the MRIs show the soft tissue, the nerves, and the cartilage, and the CAT scans and X-rays show the bone. So the next group I see related to sports are the grandparents who can't sit in a bleacher, or sitting in the bleacher causes such intolerable pain that they can't go to the games.
Yeah, I like that too.
Kind of corny, but it's fun.
It works. The whole demographic spectrum. I love it.
Let's go.
All right, here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2.
So the other group that comes into the office this time of year at the start of the sports season is not the student athlete, but it's the spectators, particularly the grandparents, but many times the parents. They just cannot sit in a stadium seat. Sitting in a stadium seat causes back pain or hip pain or sometimes neck and shoulder pain. And they don't want to miss out on the games. All the action is, but they can't sit. So they're off standing at the bottom of the bleachers or trying to rig up some kind of chair. And what I tell them is the reason they can't sit is they either have a pinched nerve somewhere or they really have the wrong posture. And so there are garments sold, kind of supportive t-shirts, that will help keep the proper posture. There's also such things as stadium chairs that fit on top of the bleachers and support the low back. Often it's too short. It needs to go all the way up to the midsection to support the whole low back and the neck. So that's my advice to them, is better posture, both through awareness, wearing supportive clothing, because it reminds a person not to slump, or buy a stadium chair, but not the kind that stops just above the belly button. This is the kind that needs to come up to about this level. Some people go out and buy the folding chairs that are easy to carry. They're canvas. They are canvas between 4 posts, but the problem is that causes people to sit down into a cavity, and so it's very hard to get out of those, and that oftentimes makes it worse. So I advise against that. Another little trick that's helpful is for people to take an anti-inflammatory before they know they have to go. So 3 Advil, 2 to 3 Advil, 1 to 2 Aleve about an hour before. That will help keep the inflammation down while they're doing it, sitting in those unsupportive bleachers, but they do need to be standing up and moving around every 45 minutes to an hour. And of course, something with the chair back that has some kind of cushion on it so that the seat can give instead of the body having to give. You're watching the C-Spine Show. I'm Dr. Craig Callewart. Please like, follow, and subscribe.
Well, I'll bet you I'm gonna be a big star. Might win an Oscar, you can't never tell. And who's gonna make me a big star? 'Cause I can play the